Embarrassing confession time. My divorce wasn't even final yet, and I started dating this guy. And before long, we were practically cohabitating, and I was envisioning this future fantasy life of us together. And all of this happened in the span of just a few weeks. And then once that early intensity faded and we got to know each other, it settled into a friendship, which is really what it should have been from the beginning. But I know that I'm not alone in that all-consuming nature of an early relationship, that sometimes we get swept along for the ride and we rush into things way too quickly before we are really ready or before we know what we're getting into. So these are 8 reasons that relationships move too fast. And then finally, some reasons why maybe you should slow it down. One of the primary reasons that relationships can move too quickly is that so many of us have a fear of being alone. And so when we find somebody, we latch on because we want somebody, and we're afraid that if we take it slow or if we risk letting go, that, well, then we won't have anybody. Sometimes people are afraid of losing the one. If you believe in a soulmate, that there's that one person out there that's right for you, well, when you meet somebody and you have that initial all-consuming spark, you believe that that's your person. And so, well, then of course it's going to be perfect and you're just going to jump in with both feet because you've never felt this way before. And this is it. And oh my goodness, here we go. And that's one of the problems with that belief in a soulmate, is it can create this sort of urgency, almost like a one-day sale at a department store. You feel like you have to pull the trigger because if you don't, that you're going to miss out on your one opportunity. Another reason that relationships move too quickly is that we all too easily confuse hormones for love. Yeah, that oxytocin and that dopamine at the beginning, it feels good. It's a rush. We are literally high. And that's probably not the best place to make a critical decision from. All right, this reason is one that people aren't often aware of, but yet I see it quite a bit, including in myself. If you have come out of a long relationship or even a marriage, you know how to be committed. You don't know how to date. And so what happens when you're dating is, well, you start to act married from the beginning because it's what you know. It's not necessarily your intention. It's not what you're looking out to do, but it's just what's comfortable. Like anything, it takes practice to learn how to date. One of the things that I found helpful to keep myself from going into that married at first sight sort of mindset was casually dating multiple people and making sure that I didn't latch on to one person too soon. Sometimes we rush into things because of external pressures, whether that be your family nagging you to get married or your desire for a child and feeling like the biological clock is ticking. Sometimes we feel rushed from the outside to be at a certain life stage by a certain age. But it's best to commit when you're ready, not when you feel like you're being told to. Sometimes we rush into things because we're falling for flattery, good old love bombing. It feels good to be desired. It feels good to have somebody tell you how amazing you are and try to woo you. That flattery can be intoxicating, especially if your self-worth is currently on the low side. Be careful though, because sometimes those accolades are used by narcissists and others with malevolent intent as sort of a bait in order to reel you in. And even if that flattery is delivered honestly, well, they don't really know you yet. So how meaningful is it really? Other times relationships move too quickly because that person reminds you of a former flame. If you lost somebody and this person has certain characteristics of that person, you might find yourself powerfully drawn towards them. But the new person is not the old person, and you have to be careful covering them in this veneer that isn't who they really are. And then finally, sometimes people end up in relationships too quickly because, well, they're just tired of dating. Because the dating scene can be exhausting. And at some point, you just might feel worn out and ready just to settle for the next thing. But entering into a relationship just because you're tired of dating is sort of like buying a house just because you're tired of paying rent. The effort is still needed. The payment still has to be made. It's just that now you're anchored to one choice. The transition between, hi, it's nice to meet you, and exclusivity or cohabitation is an important one. And many relationships don't weather that transition from casual to committed. And that's okay. In fact, that's what dating is all about. Trying on, testing out, and sometimes sending back. In the beginning, your feelings are based more on fantasy than on reality. And if you act upon those feelings too soon, you may find yourself committed to or even married to someone very different than the picture you had created in your mind. And once you've committed, either by word or deed, it makes it so much more difficult for that relationship to end. After all, we are all victim to the sunk cost fallacy. Once we've put that time, energy, money into something, we don't want to let it go, even if we should. Trying to force too much on your relationship too soon is kind of like asking a 3-year-old to organize your retirement plan. It's placing responsibilities before foundation. Allow your relationships to mature in their own time and in their own way. A good relationship requires vulnerability and trust, and those two things cannot be rushed. A race to the end in a relationship often just brings the end of a relationship. There's no hurry. Be where you are and enjoy each step of the way.